welcome, star people. This is the Outlaw Astrology Podcast, and I'm your host, APM, your intrepid star guide and cosmic detective, and today we're diving into the fascinating world of aspects in criminal astrology. And before we begin, a trigger warning: we will be discussing themes related to criminal behavior. If this episode also contains mature content and may not be suitable for all listeners, so if you feel like you need to give it a pass, please feel free to do so. Let's explore how planetary aspects can shed light on criminal tendencies and behaviors. Alrighty, so we're going to start first with the soft aspects. That is the trine and the sextile. Now, a soft aspect is a show of ease. It's a flow of energy between planets and points. And in criminal astrology, these can indicate trines 120 degrees apart. That means a sun in Leo and the moon in Sagittarius at 12 degrees each. That would be a trine. They're both in the same element. Trines tend to be, and by tend I mean absolutely, they're in the same element. So earth, earth, fire, fire, water, water, air, air, okay? So natural talents that could be misused, for example, Mars trine Neptune might show skillful deception, okay? So then there's also sextiles. And sextiles are 60 degrees apart. And they will be fire, air, and earth, water. So they are opportunities and learned skills. And by that, we mean that a trine is supportive and easeful, meaning that it feels natural because it's a part of a long conditioned responses within, meaning something that has been probably taught since childhood, but it's very long term, and it makes things feel easy. So if you have studied dance since the age of 6, as I have, being able to, dance freestyle is a lot easier than if you've had no dance training or no inclination toward dance. That is a trine aspect. It feels natural. The energy flows easily, like people who are just pick up maths and are just fabulous at it and just have no difficulty whatsoever since practically day one. Okay? Whereas a sextile, 60 degrees apart, opportunity to learn skills, and is an opportunity to learn something new. It is an opportunity to take something that is an interest or could be a supportive skill and making the choice and therefore the effort to get better. So, you're not naturally great at maths, but you decide to put in the time and the effort to understand it and to get better at it so that when you are in school, you can get better scores, for example. And so an example of this would be Mercury sextile Uranus could indicate clever schemes. So let's say Mercury in Aquarius, sextile Uranus. And let's say that Uranus is in, we'd need fire. Aries, because it was in Aries a few years ago. So Mercury in Aquarius, sextile Uranus in Aries, could indicate clever schemes, for good or for ill. Here's the thing. Just because a trine exists or a sextile exists, it doesn't necessarily mean all the time that this is a good thing. Trines can be also where we're stubborn, or where we're less inclined to take action, even when action is warranted, appropriate, and sometimes necessary. And sextiles can be missed opportunities, like we have a skill to be a better artist, but we just don't apply ourselves. So we have a good mind, but we just don't want to put the effort in to be a great student because we're thinking, I'm an okay student and that's good enough for me for my purposes. So when I'm talking about clever schemes could be, yeah, it's a good thing, or it can be a clever scheme that's a bad thing. There are crimes, true crimes, in which people got conned out of money or out of something that they valued, and they didn't take it well. And it resulted in someone being injured or someone ending up quite frankly, dead. So just because a scheme is clever doesn't mean it's a healthy scheme, doesn't mean that it's a good scheme. It could be clever, but it can be clever in the way that it's bad for the person who conceives of it and worse for everybody around them if they oppose it. The same way Mars trine Neptune, that means Mars in Cancer trine Neptune in Pisces, which is also current, could be skillful deception. That means someone who is a excellent emotional manipulator, who knows how to use emotion and understands emotions well enough to be able to get people to go along with them against their better judgment. So that's what I'm talking about here. That's how a trine or a sextile in a criminal chart can be used. It can be used for ill. It can also be luck, meaning that a person is skillful enough at deception to evade capture, clever enough at scheming also to evade capture and to lie track in a completely different direction so that the criminal investigators are looking in a direction that is nowhere near the perpetrator or even the victim and their connection to that victim, okay? Now, the hard aspects are squares and oppositions. And hard aspects show tension and conflict between planetary energies. Okay? So, squares at 90 degrees are internal conflicts and challenges. For example, the moon square Pluto can show emotional manipulation. Now, the moon is very shape-shifty anyway. It's ambiguous anyway. But the sign that it's in can give you some indicators about how the energy will play in conflict. See, conflict isn't necessarily a bad thing. Conflict requires resolution, and if you are in conflict, at some point you're going to get better at troubleshooting. Troubleshooting is a form of creativity to resolve things, which will give you better skills there. So the moon in Cancer square Pluto in, I'm trying to think, the most recent, because Capricorn, there we go. That would be an opposition, though. So let's put it Pluto in Aries, just for the sake of talking. And that would be emotional manipulation. But it also could be emotional manipulation through violence or through aggression, because Pluto in Aries, Aries is ruled, shot called, guided by war planet Mars. Okay? So it would be emotional manipulation, that's the moon part, but it could also be through the threat of aggression or violence, which is fear, because the moon is also related to fear. Now, oppositions are 180 degrees apart. That's two planets in opposing signs. So we're talking about Libra, Aries, Pisces, Virgo, Sagittarius, Gemini, Scorpio, Taurus. Did I leave anything out? Scorpio, Taurus, and etc. Okay? And also Leo, Aquarius, Leo. Okay? So oppositions, that's an opposition. So awareness through polarization, meaning that there's an opportunity to make a choice, but just because you can see clearly how to make that choice doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make a choice that is going to be beneficial for everybody involved, including yourself, or maybe the choice might be to focus more on what you want and less on what would be good for other people. So an example of this would be Mars opposite Saturn, okay? So Mars in Aries opposite Saturn in Libra. Now, for those of you who are astute astro people, you astute star people are going to note that these two, Mars in Aries is in the sign of its domicile, meaning it's at home, and Saturn in Libra, Saturn is exalted in Libra, meaning it's meant to function well. So those two in aspect might indicate conflicts with authority. Saturn is about authority, Mars is about challenging, so challenging authority. Okay, which is not necessarily a bad thing. challenging authority is what helps change happen. Sometimes authority is wrong. Sometimes authority are their people too. Sometimes they make choices and put up challenges for their own self-interest because they're trying to maintain the status quo, thereby maintain their social position and their life the way it is. And Mars is here to challenge that. So that's the opposition there. And conflicts with authority, which is not, like I said, not necessarily a bad thing. It becomes a bad thing when it's just rebelling or challenging without any particular plan. And so we'll see that in crimes that appear to be very, very violent and be very much against authority, but it seems like there doesn't seem to be a point, or at least not one we can ascertain. Okay, so those are the hard aspects. The third aspect would be, which is conjunctions at 0 degrees. Now, technically, conjunctions are not aspects. Okay, so when I see people saying, oh, it's a hard aspect, well, technically, or soft aspect, it's neither. It's neutral. It's neither a soft or a hard aspect. It's not technically an aspect. But for the sake of modern astrology as it's practiced, we call it an aspect to make it easier. So that would be at 0 degrees. Conjunctions blend energies and can be beneficial or challenging depending on which planets are playing a part. So if we have a conjunction between planets, let's say, for example, just in this particular example, the Sun conjunct Mercury is neutral. But if it's in a day chart or a night chart, that will determine more. But it's neutral. Say if the Sun is conjunct Venus or Jupiter, that would be more of a beneficial conjunction. And I'm speaking very basically. And by the same token, that Sun in aspect to Mars or Saturn, which are the malefics, to the benefics, which are Venus and Jupiter, when it's Mars and Saturn, it would be more challenging. However, in this case, there is a caveat. In a day chart, Mars is the troublemaker. So that would make Sun and Mars conjunction a hard aspect in a day chart. Whilst in a night chart, Saturn and the Sun in conjunction would be a hard aspect. So it depends on where the Sun happens to be in the chart to determine that. And that's something that I wanted to make certain to make very clear. Now, when it comes to benefics, that, like I said, Venus and Jupiter, positive outcomes, that is very basic. Example, Venus conjunct Jupiter might show excessive indulgence. Now, planets in conversation, which is what an aspect is, doesn't necessarily have to be great. Just because it is the Venus and Jupiter having a chat with the Sun or having a chat with the Moon or whatever, doesn't necessarily make it a good thing. It can be excessive, especially if Jupiter is involved. And it can be way too much people-pleasing and harmony at the cost of what is good and right. Just because we want harmony doesn't necessarily mean that is a good thing. So in Venus conjunct Jupiter can show definitely spoiled, pampered, excessive indulgence, and that could make it more of a me. And you're going to see those types of aspects in the charts of crimes in which the person only cared about what they wanted. Like a husband who does away with his wife and children because he's met someone he likes better than his current spouse. Someone that makes him feel like he wants to feel. So, of course, his family must go so he can pursue this new relationship. And there are many true crime cases in which this is absolutely the motivation and catalyst. And then there's the malefics. And these are the challenging scenarios. So Mars conjunct Saturn, for example, might indicate calculated aggression. So let's say Mars and conjunct Saturn in Aries. Well, Saturn is not at home in Aries. That is the sign of its fall. Mars is just fine, but Saturn is in no position to help, keeping in mind that Saturn is an outer planet. And that means it shapes the expression of Mars the same way Jupiter in the previous example would shape the expression of Venus. Okay? So that's where we get the indulgence for the benefics, and this is where we get the calculated aggression, because Saturn is about hard lessons, it's about discipline. So it's going to be aggressive, yes, but it's not going to be aggressive in a way that isn't going to be socially acceptable. So it's going to be calculated aggression, means aggression that is socially acceptable, that people are not going to be easy to find fault with, and the person can talk their way out of. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. In the first example, let's say Venus conjunct Jupiter in Pisces. That seems lovely, but it's also very dreamy, very foggy, very misty. So nothing is entirely clear. Yes, things are fantastical. And so you'll get these type of things when you have like the doomsday cults, where, a spaceship is going to come down and it's going to cart us away from this terrible world. That is a fantasy. It's beautiful. It's lovely. And to be clear, we don't actually know what or who is out there and if they are friendly, but it's a lovely story. We can transcend this world. We can escape it. Let's not fix it. Let's not do that. We can leave it entirely on a spaceship. Okay? That is Venus and Jupiter showing excessive indulgence, meaning indulging in an escapist fantasy. And then, when the fantasy fails to materialize, taking the extreme action to sacrifice one's lives to avoid living in this world, because that sacrifice is going to take us to that ship. Okay, so those are some of the ways that conjunctions can show up in a criminal chart and how they can work. Now, once again, just because the malefics are there doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. And just because we've got a lot of connections to Venus and Jupiter doesn't mean we're on an easy street. A lot of connections to Venus and Jupiter can be indulgence, can be pampered, can be lazy, can be spoiled, can be very self-involved. Okay, so for good or for ill, the stars can help us understand things better. Now, we've got the minor aspects. Now, I use only two, as a rule. And these are more subtle influences that can add more complexity to the chart. So a semi-sextile is 30 degrees. That is, it is half of a sextile, which is 60 degrees. And these are slight tensions requiring adjustment. So this is what you're going to see in signs that are adjacent to one another. So let's say Venus Venus semi-sextile Jupiter. So let's say that Venus is in Aries and Jupiter is in Pisces at the same degree 13. That would be a semi-sextile. That's 30 degrees apart. These are subtle tensions, meaning that you may not always feel, they may not always be felt as openly, as easily as, say, the major aspects. So it's more like having a grain of sand rubbing against your toe rather than a small pebble, which would be the major aspects in a chart. So a semi-sextile between Venus in Aries and Jupiter in Pisces, well, Venus is all about go, 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 assert myself, and Jupiter in Pisces is more dreamy and fantastical. So that energy doesn't actually play really nice together. So that means that sometimes, for unknown reasons, we're going to be very much in your face, go, 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 break the rules, and then all of a sudden, we're going to be more like, ooh, very dreamy and very fantastical, and how can we transcend, kind of vibe. Doesn't always play nice. A quincunx is 150 degrees away. So what you're going to do to find a quincunx is look for an wow, my tongue is really starting to act really wonky today. Anyway, a quincunx, you're going to find it by looking for an opposition. So, Saturn and that's my tummy grumbling, sorry. Saturn in Libra opposing Mars in Aries, that is an opposition. So what you're going to do is look at the signs on either side of that opposition. So on either side of Aries, it is Pisces and Taurus. on either side of Libra, it is Scorpio and Capricorn. So let's look at, say, Mars in Capricorn, quincunx, Saturn in, because it doesn't line up nicely. So quincunxes don't play nice. So Mars in Aries, quincunx, Saturn in Capricorn, that's a square. Actually, I'm sorry. But anyway, quincunxes are 150 degrees apart. So if you got Mars hanging out, you're looking to Libra as in the middle there. That means Saturn in Scorpio isn't going to play very nice. Saturn in Scorpio is definitely going to be hard for Mars and Aries to play nice with, because Saturn is not in a sign, it's not uncomfortable there, but it's also not comfortable there as well. And so that is an adjustment. Quincunxes are uncomfortable connections that need integration, whereas a semi-sextile are slight tensions that require smaller adjustments. They both require adjustments. That's the point. It's just that in a semi-sextile, the adjustment's going to be a smaller one than in a quincunx. So quincunxes feel much more uncomfortable than a semi-sextile. So that means that Mars in Aries might want to break the rules, might want to just jump. But Saturn in Scorpio is like, wait a second. I don't want to jump like that. I want to hide my tracks. I want to do this from the darkness. I don't want everybody to see what I'm doing. And if I go out there and do it like that, it's just not going to succeed as I hope. I.e., I shouldn't do it like that. I need to be more cautious. So you have the energy that says, I want to get out there and do it. And then another energy that says, hold your horses there, friend. I don't want to get caught. So we have to find ways to evade capture. And Scorpio is all about, that hard outer shell that holds the delicate insides. And so it's very protective, very self-protective. And so that energy of breaking rules and asserting is going to come up against self-protection, which will mitigate that desire to get out there and assert and be aggressive, which can build up as tension inside. And since this is a quincunx and not a square or an opposition, it doesn't easily resolve itself. It's constantly having to live with that internalized pressure and find small ways to be able to vent that pressure when necessary. Okay, so these are the aspects in criminal astrology. Okay, and so the key takeaway here is that aspects in criminal astrology are not deterministic. They show potential energies that can be expressed in various ways. So consider this: we all have a certain degree of free will and the ability to channel these energies constructively according to our own life goals, our own objectives, our own vision, our own values, etc. So, that is all for today, star people. One last thing to consider: please use this knowledge reasonably and ethically. And some housekeeping, because I do believe I've forgotten that. The Outlaw Astrology can be found on Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube. That will be links located in the show notes. There is also a Daily Stargazer newsletter with its own podcast for those of you who are interested in what's going on in the stars every single day. That link also in the show notes. Please like, share, and subscribe. And review, give us 5 stars so that other people can find us with greater ease. Please do so on whatever you happen to listen to your podcast. Thank you very much for sticking with me and tuning in today. And until next time, keep watching the stars and stay curious. Peace and astro.